Welcome back to the Practice Pulse, where we help owners of private medical and wellness practices scale their revenue and patient lifetime value by implementing smart systems. Today, we're honored to speak with a leader who has mastered the art of sustaining a critical mission-driven wellness organization. I'm thrilled to introduce Sarina DiBianca, the Executive Director of Siloam Wellness. Sarina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor as well.
Awesome. If you don't mind, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your background and this Trauma and Wellness Center?
Well,
Okay.
I'm the executive director. We're a 30-year-old nonprofit that was founded by a priest and a nun during the AIDS pandemic. People were just dying left and right, and they needed to be a face for the voice of dying people. We're not religious. However, we were co-founded by a priest and a nun who really went out as renegades and kind of said to the church, we need to be and do better. So here we are. 30 years later, people aren't dying. So the mission has changed somewhat and stayed the same. In many cases, we still work with people living with HIV. Every time the front door opens and somebody comes into Siloam, the very first thing we have to do is unpack their trauma, whether it's, childhood trauma, sexual trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, trauma, whatever it is, it's true, we have to unpack it. And so, we may have somebody coming through our doors that are 50 years old that have never been told they're worthy and that they're worth getting better. And so we usually get our friends, is how we refer to people that come to Siloam, through their case managers, the clinics, the hospitals, who have a patient who isn't following their medical protocol. And we are I like to say, the bridge between the clinician and either the street or the hospital. Because if you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to follow somebody's medical protocol. All right, Sarina, you have HIV, you have diabetes, you have all of these things. And if I don't believe that I'm worthy of getting better, I'm never going to follow what you have asked me to do and all of the medicine that you've given me. So that's where I come in, Siloam comes in, and we let them know that they are worthy. Yeah, that whatever was in their past is in their past, but look at who you are today. Look at how amazing you are today. You're clean, you're sober, you're working on it. Whatever brought you through the front door today is an amazing step in your journey. And it's all about the journey. So each one of our journeys are very different and they look different, feel different. And there's no competition on how we got here. But we're here. And once we allow them to believe in themselves and give them a very healthy, solid foundation, whether it's an emotional foundation that they never had, whether it's a spiritual foundation they never had, whatever it is, whatever they need, that's where we start. And then they start to follow their medical protocol. And so they don't end up in the hospital. They don't end up, on the streets, certainly don't end up in the hospital as frequently as they would have in the past. And we do all sorts of, nothing fits everybody. So we have an HIV support group. We have a trauma support group. We have a men's group. We have an anxiety support group. And then we do all holistic things like tapping energy. We have poetry for those who don't want to be in a typical group for whatever reason, but need to get their feelings and emotions out. So we work on poetry. Why did that particular poem on friendship resonate with you? How did it resonate with you? And then they're talking and they're getting their feelings and emotions out in a non-therapeutic environment. We have insight healing group. We have chair yoga for those who aren't as ambulatory. You could always lie on the floor and do the, chair yoga or do the yoga on the floor. But if you're not that ambulatory, you could do it in a chair. We have breath work that teach us how to breathe. Not many people realize they don't breathe right. Babies and animals breathe right, and they breathe from their belly. When you watch a
Hmm.
baby sleep, its belly rises and falls. When you watch an animal, and animals are fight or flight. So you take a deer who's being chased by a lion, and if he escapes and the lion goes away, he stops, he shakes all that stress off and goes back to grazing. Us, for that, a lack of, not knowing how to shake it off, it plays in our head and it eats
Hmm.
us up alive, you know, and our flight or fight is broken many times. We don't know how to get rid of it and move forward and say, hey, I escaped that. I was able to get out of that situation, whatever it is. So we teach people how to breathe properly. I found
I
out
love that.
I wasn't breathing properly. We do Reiki sessions. We have massage. We have 3-day retreats. We do
Wow.
retreats. Yeah, we take people away out of the city to a retreat center where they can just relax and have no outside disruptions, and they can spend 3 days working on their own internal fortitude and, amaze, find out what cool things they've done in their lives and own it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you're taking that holistic approach, and I feel like you're really bridging a gap because we don't hear a lot about the HIV and AIDS epidemic anymore because it's, there are treatments that are extremely effective, but you don't think about the gap there of, okay, we have these very effective treatments, but how do we get people to follow them? So I love that you're taking a holistic approach to help people see value in themselves so that they'll stick with the protocol. I love that.
And we see people without HIV as well, in the trauma. We run groups for children from 8 to 18. Of course, we take any age group. The little guys come with their 8-year-old siblings, and we don't turn anybody away. And we talk about, what does trauma look like? And we bring in pro players. We have Jermaine Jones, who was a former 76er and LA Laker. And we have Navar Gatson, who played in Japan until this year, and he just retired. And they talk about their trauma, and they didn't know they had trauma, but all that anger went on the backboard. We do football events. All that anger goes on the football field. But
Right.
what happens if you don't make the pros? What happens when you're just a woman who is going to college, and she possibly a woman of color, so she's fighting all sorts of stigmas. What is it like to be a woman in this environment, first and foremost? And then what is it like to be a woman of color? So we try to say to them, own who you are and how you're amazing. And don't let that trauma sideline you, because what we have found so many times is kids, or the people who come through Siloam, all had childhood trauma that never was dealt with. So what do you do with that trauma? What do you do with all that negative feeling and emotion? You either put a needle in your arm, you have risky sexual behavior, you put a gun in your hand. I mean, we see it time and time and time again. These young folks who don't deal with their trauma try to block it out however they can. And that's where we come in and say, hey, listen to these pro players who, from our advantage point, had everything going for them. But what they didn't have going for them was dealing with their trauma. So we'll get 10 kids and of course, they're playing basketball or football, depending on the event we're doing. And then we bring them into groups where they talk to these guys who say, listen, don't make the mistakes I made. And we'll have 10 kids stand up and we'll say, do you know that statistics prove that 7 out of 10 of you admit to having trauma? 7 out of 10 children admit. So we said, just talk to somebody. Talk to your teacher, your counselor, talk to one another. Get those feelings and emotions out. Talk to any of us wearing, the full court press for awareness t-shirt. Talk to somebody, because we're all here to help. And we're all here to let you know how amazing you are. And we give out mirrors and we look at yourself. Look at how amazing you are. You can go to college. You can do all of these things, which is true. But for a child who may be suffering from food insecurity or not having electric in their home, and their moms, and this is a misnomer, their moms and dads or grandmas they're working, but It's called the Alice population, where they have limited income. And so mom can keep a roof over your head, but I might have to not have electricity this week so I could buy groceries. Or then I turn the electricity on, but I can't buy groceries. And, weekends are a stressor because you're not getting 2 meals in school. Summers are stressors because you're not getting fed. Our food pantry, the Siloam Food Pantry, which is a choice pantry, has exploded. This year, we ran out of food every month because of growing prices. Our food pantry, we've run out of protein each and every month. And then since November, when the SNAP benefits did get cut off, it really exploded. And so we know that there's a need. And so we offer a choice pantry to anyone that comes through our doors. So there's that.
You have so many different resources. Tell me a little bit about the community that you serve. Like what are the surrounding areas like specifically, but then also like what kind of people are coming in? I know you said 8 and above. Like what would maybe lead someone to come seek you out?
Well, to your point, there's so many facets. If it's a sporting group, event during the summer, pu- publicize it and have like the same kids coming back year after year because it's such an amazing day. We have organizations that come to us that say, hey, I'm running, I work for a organization that has first responders that are serving the underserved population and that are hearing horrible stories every single day. And now my staff has secondary trauma. Can you run a group for us? And they'll pay us. And can you run a group? And we'll have our psychologist there and all of that we do, we'll run through yoga and tapping and have them get out their feelings and emotions because they're dealing with it every single day. So now they have secondary trauma. We have, as I said, the people that usually walk through our doors, we're giving our number through the hospital or through their case manager for whatever they're going to their case manager for.
Yeah, so it sounds like people are finding you in many different ways.
Yeah.
So the core problem solved by Siloam transcends traditional medical care. It focuses on the mind, the body, and the spiritual wellness. For the community you serve, like what specific problems do you solve? I know you talked about trauma a lot, but why is addressing the emotional and spiritual dimension of the health essential for the individuals to thrive?
Well, there's this saying that dis-ease causes disease. And so really that's the crux of it. When we're working with these people and the first thing they're talking about is their childhood trauma and they're 50 or 60 years old, you know that all of those unaddressed situations weren't addressed and their life went sideways. We have people who are college educated but never dealt with, I have a very good friend of mine who teaches lots of our groups and classes who never dealt with being gang raped as a 14-year-old.
Wow.
Didn't tell her parents because, she didn't want to relive it. And so when she was done college, she started doing drugs and her life took a turn to the negative. But she's getting her doctorate. She's amazing. And and so only when she was able to deal with her own trauma and, she works with kids and she's like, don't do what I did. Don't do drugs. And they're like, she goes, don't even start. Don't tell me you don't know anybody doing drugs. Don't tell me you don't know anybody selling drugs, and then they're like nodding their heads like, yeah, it doesn't always have to be that bad. It could be, we have a volunteer who happens to be a nun who always knocks on the door. And I said, you don't have to knock on the door, just come on in. And she said, well, in the 3rd grade, my teacher told me to go to the other teacher's room. And when I walked into that teacher's room and deliver whatever I was, the teacher humiliated me in front of the class and told me I was disrespectful for walking in and go back out, knock on the door and wait for, approval to enter, and so that left her with being ridiculed, a whole group of kids laughing at her. And so there's no right or wrong to what affects us and how it affects us. Somebody, could have just shrugged that off and not given a second thought. But for somebody else, that is game changing. And there's no right or wrong in how your trauma came about. And there's also no competition on like trauma's better than yours or worse than yours.
Right.
We have 2 psychologists. I need to give a shout out to them because they are amazing. Dr. Bob Thornton, and he runs our HIV support group, and then Dr. Paul Ashton, and he runs our trauma support group. And they are just amazing human beings that I absolutely love and adore. And, we just have all sorts of wonderful people that help Siloam be what it is. I'm kind of like the facilitator that puts it all together, but I'm not it. It started with our co-founders who had this vision. And then we are who we are because of our phenomenal volunteer staff, because we run pretty much on a volunteer staff, since everything we do is free, unless somebody hires us to do an external event, which does not happen very often.
Right.
But there's a documentary about Siloam called Living Positive.
Awesome.
It's on YouTube and it's also on our website, which is siloamwellness.org. And it talks about, and you'll hear, and when you watch it, because we put probably about 10 different people in front of the filmmakers, and they chose who they chose for the stories that they had. And everyone talks about their trauma. That was the first thing they talked about, So it's
Very cool.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you gave a shout out to your team. It sounds like you have a very strong kind of rock star team that's pulling all of this together to help everyone.
For
Love that.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of some of your competitive edge in the space. Siloam was a beacon of hope against HIV and AIDS at its inception. What is the competitive edge of Siloam Wellness Center today, and how do you ensure that your program continues to nurture the dignity and humanity with every person who walks through your doors?
Let me answer the second one first.
Sure.
What we ensure is a safe haven for everyone. And these folks, they're my family. They're my friends. They're amazing. They have the strongest internal fortitude. They have the deepest faith, and they've, in many cases, have had horrific childhoods or situations or things happen to them. Yet they're strong 10 times, 20 times, 100 times stronger than I could ever be. So they recognize that in order to have a safe space, they have to offer a safe space, right? I can't talk about Nancy when she walks out the door. Nancy's not going to talk about me when I walk out the door, because we owe it to one another. So I think that is probably the answer to both things. The competitive edge, as well as everything we do, is free. So that makes my life very difficult. I have to figure out how I do that and how I pay for that.
Yeah.
But everybody, that comes to us lives close to or under the poverty line. If you're a wealthy individual who has trauma, you're going to your private masseuse, you're going to your own therapist. You're not coming to Siloam for free yoga classes. So I don't know what makes us different. We're the only one in the United States that does mind, body, and spiritual wellness for people living with HIV. We're the only one.
Yeah.
We have people reaching out to us from as far away as Rwanda, Africa. We have people from London and Wales join in our groups online. This October and November, we were invited to speak at 2 national conferences. One from Sigma Gamma Rho, which is one of the Divine Nine for the women of color in the sorority of Sigma Gamma Rho, and talked about, staying strong. What does it take to rise above the trauma How tired are you at the end of the day for fighting all of the battles that you've had to fight? And so many times, and this is what resonated in that meeting, which I thought was pretty terrific. The one woman said, we hear that the Black women are the backbone of voting, which is very true. And Black women are the backbone of their families, which is very true.
Hmm.
And the uphill battle we have to fight as young women graduating college and or people who have been out of college for many, many years and what they've had to battle in corporate America and how exhausting they were saying that was. Like, "I'm tired," is what resonated in that meeting. I'm just exhausted from having to be all this and fight this uphill battle. So that was the one conference that we were invited to. And then the other is called ANAC, which stands for Association of Nurses in AIDS Care. And both of these were national conferences. And we were asked, they showed our documentary, and then there was a Q&A, and then we offered Reiki all 3 days of the conference to the and this was for the caregivers, right? So to the nurses, the doctors, the
That's
first
great.
liner, and we offered that. And then on the last day, Dr. Bob Thornton and I attended again, and we did the closeout for people who had been lost in the last 40 years to AIDS
Wow.
or AIDS, the comorbidities of AIDS. So we were
Powerful.
really, yeah, we were really honored to be asked at these national conferences. And I hope we do more of it because people need to know about trauma.
They do. Yes, trauma. I love that trauma informed care has been climbing to the forefront in many different spaces. And I think it's great that you're taking that holistic approach and really hitting kind of everything, it sounds like.
Yeah, because it
And
is the
there's,
whole body approach. It's,
yeah,
if I don't deal with whatever it is, my kid could be mad at me and not talking to me for 6 months. Thank God that's not the case, but if that were, it would eat me alive. And so many times now you have, chest pain or hip pain or where all that emotion is getting caught up in you somewhere, somehow. I myself am a hypnotherapist, and sometimes I'll have people come to me and say, "Well, here's what's happening to me. I can't sleep. And I can't sleep because, you know, I'm worried." And then you put the person under hypnosis, and the person's parent would beat them at night while they were asleep. And they've blocked that out. Had no idea that that happened. Yet they'd be sleeping and all of a sudden get woken up because they're getting a beating for something.
yeah,
And then we can say, okay, here's why you can't sleep. But, you know, you haven't seen your father in 20 years and he's never going to hurt you
yeah,
ever, ever again. You have nothing to do with him for all sorts of other reasons, not this one, because this one you didn't even remember.
right.
However, you're safe. You can sleep. He can't hurt you. And you walk through all of those steps. And the next day, when I call her, she's like, I only woke up 5 times last night instead of my normal 50 times. And
Yeah,
then I listened to the audio that we created together and it was soothing. And then the next night, I only woke up twice. And that's how it works. That person's not living with HIV, but they are living with trauma.
yeah. Yeah, I love that you're peeling back the layers of what the real root cause is for the reason that people are having the symptoms, the body,
Yeah.
because trauma manifests in our bodies. And I love that you're digging deeper. And I didn't know that you did hypnosis.
Yeah.
I've read a huge book on neuro-linguistic programming, and I'm a big proponent of that being used for good to help people overcome different things in their lives.
Well, as we mentioned in the very beginning, not everything works for everyone, right? So if you want, hypnosis, great. If you want yoga, great. If you need to be in a trauma support group, great. If you need all of the above, great. If you don't want anything but poetry, great. It's there's a lot of isolation and stigma that comes with having HIV, and there's a lot of isolation and stigma that comes with trauma, completely unrelated. If I start to tell you I have this, and this, I'm being really vulnerable. And I think I trust you, and you seem like you're my friend, but when I unpack and unload, you're like, this is way too much. I don't want to hear her crap. I only want to go out to coffee and hear fun things, you
Right.
know? And so being vulnerable and taking that chance to say, this is who I really am and this is what I'm really dealing with opens you up to a whole lot of criticism and, sometimes people who you thought were your friends ultimately weren't.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about scaling the mission and sustaining. So, like, when you're looking at scaling to help more people and sustaining a mission driven organization, as you have for you and your team, your founders for 30 years, that's a massive business achievement. What has been the most effective growth strategy for Siloam Wellness in expanding its suite of programs and maintaining longevity through changing economic and healthcare landscapes?
Asking question, what do you need? How can I help? Let me know what it is and I'll try to see if I can do it. I would love another massage therapist. I would love to be able to do acupressure or acupuncture. I don't have those resources right now, but I know that they are a need. But asking the question, and during COVID, when we asked the question, what do you need? They said anxiety. And so we started an anxiety group. And these groups, the vast majority of them through COVID are online. So I do very few things in person and almost everything online. So I will use the chair yoga or the breath work. So although breath work is done in person, and so is the insight healing, that's done in person. And then we take it and we upload it to our YouTube channel. The yoga is online every Monday at tonight at 7 o'clock. However, 7 o'clock might not be a good time. I just got home from work. I'm trying to cook dinner. Then I've got to clean up the dishes. Then I have to get the kids ready for bed. And I can't make 7 o'clock. However, when they're all put to bed and I can relax at 9:30 at night, I can go to the YouTube channel and watch the yoga and do the yoga.
Love that.
Have that be there. So we really try to keep up with you know, the changing times as far as what is available that wasn't available 20 years ago. None of those things were available, 30 years ago when Siloam opened their doors, but they are today. So I think that's part of it. And most importantly, asking the question, how can I help? What do you need?
I think that's great. I love that you're really community and client driven in terms of like the direction that you're heading and how you're helping all of these individuals. And also, as you just said, you're following along with technology. You're advancing as technology advances and going where it's leading you, which I think is amazing that you're able to offer this to so many people through online platforms. That's great. Very cool. Let's talk about your biggest lesson. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned while leading Siloam Wellness and about balancing a powerful mission with the practical necessity of resources and growth? How do you balance that? What's your biggest lesson?
The biggest lesson is listening. Listening. And to be present, not just be present in the room. And my mind is, oh, how am I going to make this work? Oh my God, where am I going to get the money? Just be present and listen and don't give any feedback. And I'll give you a perfect example. They were talking about in group a couple weeks ago about what it's like to be a person of color who their ancestors built this country. This country was built on the backs of people of color, and what that felt like to hear the stories of their great grandparents who had been slaves that were then once slavery ended, then Jim Crow laws came to then keep you down in a different way. And so you just listen. They don't have a perspective on that other than the fact that it was so incredibly wrong. And I
Hmm.
can recognize that and say, I'm sorry for everything that your ancestors have gone through, but it's my time to just listen. And then they go, well, when the Japanese were put through internment camps, they were given money, but we weren't. Or you have anyone that comes to group that is a Native American, what they went through. And that those atrocities, you just listen because I've never walked that walk, but I know that walk sucked and was
Yeah.
wrong on every level. And it's really, you listen.
Yeah. And it's still sucks today with microaggressions and macroaggressions,
For
it's
sure.
still a constant battle that, and I think, I don't know about you, but as a white woman, to me it's part of, I've got 3 kids. It's part of my within my home mission to make sure that I raise, anti-racist inclusive children that understand, what do these words mean? What happened to this group of people? And why is it our responsibility to, become, an advocate or a voice or an amplifier to make sure that, these wrongs aren't continued? So I love that you're providing a safe space for people to share. I think that's so powerful within those communities.
Well, it's funny when this situation is not funny, but when George Floyd was murdered and they were
Hmm.
having all of those walks and marches against what happened to him. Here's our 80-year-old co founder, Sister Bernadette, out there marching with the rest of them. To your point, the best thing we could do is to teach our children to love everyone and not judge them by how much money they have in their pocket or how much education they have or the color of their skin, their sexuality, because it's only by happenstance that I was born a straight white woman in the United States. I didn't ask for
Right?
any of that. None of that is any of my design, right? It's just who I am. So knowing that and knowing that God makes everybody in his own image, if you believe that, which I happen to, then I know that I'm no better than anybody else. But what I do have is I can be the voice and the face to support you
Yeah.
where I can. So, given I have daughters, so I have 2 daughters, and to tell them, hey, listen, love somebody for who they are. My older daughter's married to a Black man. I have 2 biracial children. And you know what I said? I did a good job. I did a good job. I taught her not to judge. My youngest daughter is in college and trying to figure out, who they are. Am I straight? Am I gay? Am I bi? What am I? Who am I? What does that look like?
Hmm.
And the only thing I've got to say is when you figure it out, I'm going to love you no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone's journey is different, and we just have to, as a society, do a better job of teaching our children as a society just to be more loving and accepting of others.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're doing a great job on both sides and providing a safe space for individuals who are slighted by, or or otherwise by, kind of the different things that are going on right now. So I commend you for that. I love the work that you're doing. And it sounds like Sister Bernadette would have been cool to hang out with.
She
I
is
would have gone to a protest with her.
she here's what, even to this day, 30 years later, everybody talks about that came in the beginning, is that this was a disease where 30 years ago, people were being turned away from hospitals, from clinics, from their families because of either their sexuality or the disease, which they didn't know many times how you got it. And she opened up the front door and gave every single person who walked through a big hug when they weren't getting hugs.
Yeah.
Father John would get a phone call that said, hey, we have John Doe and we're letting him out of the hospital. But because he's been in the hospital for 3 months, he doesn't have a place to go because his partner died of AIDS, and he probably has 72 hours to live, and he was ostracized by his family, and we don't know what to do. And Father Don would pick up the phone and call the parents of that young man and said, "Hey, you were here when he was born. Do you want to be here when he dies? Because he's
Yeah.
dying." And he was very successful in bridging that gap. And they would take their son or brother home to be loved during that dying process. And thank God we don't have to do that anymore
Yeah. It's
because of
great.
modern. But
Yeah, that
like a $500 million or 400 million was just cut from HIV research. So there's that.
yeah, it definitely puts it's a bump in the road. We hope it's just a bump in the road. Hopefully the path changes on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like I love that Father Don Riley was he used his position because I know I was raised Catholic, so just coming from a Catholic family, especially with my grandmother, it was like, okay, the priest is the end all be all when it comes to what you should do. So using that kind of position of power, if you will, to really kind of influence people to help them bridge the gap and help them see the light on, okay, this is your son, this is your daughter, this is your brother, like bring this person home back to your family, you know?
So I can't speak for Father Don or
Uh-huh.
Sister Bert. However, I would say that they never looked at it from a position of power, but one from love.
Right. Yeah. That's good. I love that. That's even better. Yeah, to come from a
A
I
position of
guess
love.
I phrased it that way just because in my experience, that's like an authoritative
Yeah,
figure
you're
to
abs-
the older
yeah,
generations in my family.
you're
So
absolutely right. It
it's like
certainly
you got
is.
to listen to the priest, you got to listen to sister so and so. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
very like so. But yes, I do. I love what you're saying, and I understand it was coming from a place of love, which
And to
is
your
paramount.
And to the point of power and love, it's hard to get nonprofits to work with one another because
Hmm.
the almighty dollar is it doesn't come very often. And so there's that. But I think when you and I are leaders and we're trying to do something in collaboration for those who we both serve, if our position, and this is where I think our government goes wrong, but if our position is one of power, we're going to get nothing accomplished. When we lead from the position of love, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Nancy and I will figure it out how
100%.
we serve those together from
Yep.
that perspective, not from the perspective of power.
I agree 100%. I was just reading a book a couple days ago, but it was talking about the statistics on women in business and how they're actually coming out with hard numbers that say that when you have 50% or greater women on your board, you're actually more profitable by a significant amount and you just have more your systems move more smoothly and you have better growth. And they're attributing it to women's ability to bridge the gap between individuals and work cohesively and really move the ball forward by working out of a place of like being outcome oriented and with like how can we all help each other, a collaboration, as opposed to the what we view as traditional kind of leadership being like very authoritative and like this is the way we're going to do things. Women tend to come at it with more of a collaborative and like bringing people together so that we can all work together to the same end.
So
So
one
I
of my
love that you said it
2026
that way.
goals is get more women on my board.
Yes,
That's a
it
great idea.
works. It brings in more money. It's been like they're proving it, you know? So yeah, I'm a big fan of operating out of love and collaboration and bringing people together. I think it's great what you're doing there. Let's talk a little bit about your systems there. So to manage a complex organization with diverse programs, which you have many of, including community engagement, you probably have some pretty robust systems in place. What are like the non-negotiable systems or platforms that you use for program registration, volunteer management, client communication? Like what kind of systems do you like you have to have these?
I run less on systems and more on human capital. So we have a program manager, Sean Francis, who does a wonderful job. So when people get sent to us by that hospital or clinic, they're not asked to fill out forms that are cold, and he calls them and says, hey, talk to me, tell me. And he's filling it out on that end. But then he can have the conversation with them on, well, here's what we offer, here's what we do. How do you think we can help you better? And it's more one-on-one versus you looking at and then it'll be followed up by a calendar that has all of our groups and classes. But if you go on our website and you see all these groups and classes, you're like, I don't know, without that conversation, that human touch. So I think that's what makes us successful is the human touch.
The guidance. Yeah.
Yes. And so we do use Find Help. And we do use Benelink who send us. So are you familiar with Find Help
So you use Find Help. What else were you saying?
and Benelink?
Been a link. I'm not. Tell me a little bit about that.
So what they do is you move into a particular city and you're new to everything and you don't know where any of the services are. So you would go into, I'll use a Siloam zip code. So you put in 19123. What are your needs? My needs are food pantry. My needs are I need trauma support group. I need a yoga class. And for each one of those things, Siloam will pop up. But every other food pantry within your zip code will also pop up. Any other trauma support groups in your zip code will pop up. And so then you fill out that information. But this is where, in my opinion, there needs to be more touch points because it's all I get an email saying, Sarina DiBianca and 19123 needs trauma. And so we don't have a phone number to call you on. Then we'll send you, here's a phone number and here's our calendar. Here are the groups and classes you can join. And probably maybe 1% actually then reach out for that next touch point and maybe make a phone call or email us, with what they really need.
Right.
We have a much better success rate when the case manager in the city calls us and says, hey, I have Sarina DiBianca. Here's her phone number. Call her. And we have a much better success rate in getting her in a group in a class and getting her the needs she needs.
Okay. Interesting. What about in terms of donors? What do you do? Do you have like a system for reaching out to get people to donate, or do you use any kind of marketing for that, or how do you get people to donate to
I think
keep
we
you
do that.
running?
Well, I think we do a lot of grant
Okay.
applying for the food pantry for trauma. We just received a $5,000 anonymous donation last week, which was amazing. And that's probably the only time this year that we got, an anonymous donation and certainly that large. We typically, that's not how we fund ourselves. It's usually applying for grants.
Okay. So you
And we have partnered with the city of Philadelphia, CBH, which is the Community Behavioral Health. And
mhm.
they know that the work we do is really amazing. So the city wants us to continue running these programs. So we've partnered with them. We've partnered with an organization called AHF, which is AIDS Healthcare Foundation.
Okay.
They are international and they are amazing in the solely, the AIDS and prevention of.
Mm.
So we've partnered with them. And then, sometimes insurance companies come to us and say, we love what you do, and we'd like to give you a community investment grant so you can keep doing what you're doing because we recognize that if you take care of our insured and you have them healthy,
Mhm.
emotionally, spiritually, physically, they will stay out of the hospital as much. They will be healthier individuals. So, we all want people to be healthy. So
Awesome.
that's how we, keep our doors open
Very cool.
is usually through community partnerships.
Okay. When it comes to operations, like what are the biggest operational bottlenecks that you currently face, whether it's scheduling or administrative tasks? What takes away from your core mission?
Me personally,
Yep.
sometimes because we're such a small staff,
Hmm.
We're in the weeds. We're in the weeds because there's nobody else to be in the weeds besides Sean and myself. So, the big broad picture, which I work on as much as possible, but sometimes I have to step away. I'll give you a perfect example. We looked at having an outside accounting firm to do the accounting for us so I don't have to do monthly accounting forms and payroll and all the weeds.
Yeah.
We didn't have that $8,000 a year to do that. It's not in my budget, so I do it.
Yeah.
But should I be doing more on a higher level critical thinking skill? Yeah, and I do that at 3 o'clock in the morning when I should be sleeping
Yeah.
because you wake up and your mind's like, okay, I have this
All the
idea.
things you have to do.
And
Yep.
so I think that's a bottleneck for me is not having the finances to either hire or outsource some of the stuff that I shouldn't be doing, but I have to do.
Okay. Interesting. Let's look at trends and opportunities looking forward. What are the most significant trends or opportunities that you see coming in the community wellness space that Siloam Wellness is preparing to leverage?
Food.
Food. Yeah.
Because as I told you, we just exploded. And so we would have 700 a month. And I had 700, in 2 weeks because he- even so when people's benefits got cut off, and I'm going to give a shout out to AHF and to the amazing work that they do. They came to me and they said, the government just did away with everybody's SNAP benefits because the government's shut down, even though Congress and the House are still, getting their, $175,000, a year. They're still getting paid even though they're not going to work. But, this young mom who works for the government making $40,000 is now not working, has no benefits, and cut off her SNAP at the same time. Okay, what is she supposed to do? So they came in and said, we want to be able to give a $100 gift certificate, a Visa gift card to everybody that comes through your doors that are on SNAP. Was it enough to make the family whole and healthy? No. But was it a tremendous, olive branch to say there's somebody out here thinking of you? And
Yeah.
and in addition to the Siloam Food Pantry, here's how we want to help. We want to be able to help where the government failed. And so they did that. And I can't be more proud to be part of an organization that is so caring for others. And we're trying to partner more on food. And so we're trying to get more grants having to do with food because food is medicine. And yes, a mom who's living under, with just strict restraints on how much she has to spend at the grocery store, she's going to buy ramen noodles. She's going to buy, you know, canned goods. She's going to buy,
Yeah.
hot dogs. And I'm not saying that we all don't do that sometimes, but do we want to do that 7 days a week? Not really. So we want to be able to order. And so right now we're partnering with AHF again. This program hasn't started, but it's slated to start in January. And it's called Healthy Fruits and Vegetables because we have gotten, we've been doing a pretty good job in December we got a $25,000 grant from Philadelphia and we are spending that strictly on protein because Catholic Social Services, which is another partner of ours, and they give us food deliveries twice a month. And they're just another amazing organization that keeps our food pantry open. But like I said, we run out of protein. So this grant that we just got, we have allotted weekly deliveries for protein. So
Mm.
chicken and tuna and whatever we can get to help feed, the families. But fruits and vegetables are very expensive. So now AHF came to me saying, we want to start this pilot system. We would like you to be our guinea pig. And I love being a guinea pig when it comes to, helping
Yeah.
those. So January is where we're going to be starting giving away healthy fruit and vegetables every single Thursday. So that's something that we've got slated for the future because food is medicine.
I
And
love that.
I'll give you an example of last year when we had our full court press. We had kids come to play basketball, and there was a young man, I think he was maybe 11, and he was sitting on the bench and not playing. And so I said, "Hey," I sat down next to him and I said, "How come you're not out there?" And he said, put his head down and goes, I'm afraid." And I said, "Okay, that's all right, buddy." I said, "But when and if you want to go out there, just let me know and we'll find your age group. We'll put you out there with your age group and we'll get you involved." And he was like, "Okay." And after lunch, he was out there, right? He was out there. The very next day, or was it that evening? And we partnered with Aetna Insurance on this program. But one of my board members who helps me run this is very good friends with the teacher who was on this bus. And when they went to get this child, his house was dark. She said to him, like, "Where's your mom?" Or where's. And I was like, "I don't know. She left." And he was like, or teacher was like, "Well, how long ago did your mom leave?" 3 months ago. He's been living in a house by himself, no food, no electricity, no running water. No wonder this young man was afraid. We
Wow.
didn't know this until after, but what we did know was he finally got out there, right? So when we were giving awards, we made sure he got an award with a book and all the things that Etna was giving away. Jermaine Jones gave away his journal for kids to write
Oh,
in. And so we made sure he got a book and a bag. And then there was Phil Martelli, who had been with St. Joe's University for 35 years, and then he was with Michigan. And he came and he was talking to the kids and he said, he pumped them up, gave them all this, feel good. And then he said, "I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to request, but I'm going to beg you. I'm going to beg you to read 10 minutes a day. I don't care what you read. It could be the
yeah.
comics, it could be, a magazine, but read 10 minutes a day." So this young man, we had one bag getting wet, ready to go. And I was with my friend Angie, who's was with Etna. And we were like, okay, we have one kid. Because we had already had like who was going to, some kids get it because they were the best. Some
Right.
kids get it because they were trying the hardest. And then we had like a couple. And this kid comes bounding up and he goes, "Please, can I get a bag? Because if you give me the bag, I promise I will do what Coach Phil asked. I will read 10 minutes a day." Both in tears. We're like, "Here's your," and I got later that night and I said, "You just don't know who you touch." But
Yeah.
we know we touched him. And then after that, we get the phone call about this young man who was living by himself. And unfortunately, the teacher needed to call DIFUS and get him in a home where there was a family member. Someday he has to deal with that trauma.
Yeah.
And so, how do you and I help that kid? If that were my kid and somebody did that to my child, we'd be having this conversation from a prison.
It's tough. I admire you for it, that it's emotionally taxing. I was a volunteer for CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, for several years, and it's very fulfilling, but it's also it can really pull on your emotions and drain your emotional energy. Just see those situations because your heart, I'm sure, just aches for that child.
Yeah. And that's where the secondary trauma comes in, right?
Yeah.
So the only thing you and I can do in the work and the advocacy that we do and everybody else that does this work is to say at the end of the day, did I do the best I can? Did I help, somebody somewhere? And if the answer is yes, you can put your head on the pillow knowing you did a good job.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to thank you, Sarina, for taking the time to chat with us and tell us more about your program. I'm floored at everything that you offer and the amazing good that you're doing in your community. I know you mentioned the website once before, but if you don't mind saying it again for our listeners, and I'll also put it in the notes.
Sure. It's Siloam, Siloam, wellness.org.
Okay, awesome. And I will put that in the notes. And for our listeners, thank you so much again for attending the Practice Pulse, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate